Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Sway Bay, and today we got our Battlegrounds Season 3 announcement. We have a new minion type, which is Undead, which we are not really surprised about from the most recent standard expansion, March of the Lich King, but we have plenty to talk about. Let's get into it. So as I mentioned before, on the 17th is the start of the new season, which does include that MMR reset, as well as the Battlegrounds season track refresh. So you can go ahead and get that season pass to get those additional cosmetics, as well as the 2 additional heroes on your selection screen. We also saw that there's going to be 32 new minions, 16 undead, and 11 dual type minions. Now, the first thought that I had when I saw that dual type minions were going to be coming to Battlegrounds was my thought about Menagerie. I love playing Menagerie boards, probably more than anyone should. So I wonder how dual type minions are going to affect that. Well, I guess we will see. Also, just a quick note that everything in this video is based on what we saw coming to Battlegrounds, and tomorrow we do see that minion changes are going to be happening and announced at 12 Pacific. So I'm sure things will be leaving, and maybe some of the things discussed in some synergies today will be leaving. But this is completely based on the minion pool that is currently in the game, as well as the new minions coming to the game. So Undead is coming to Battlegrounds, and in the blog post, it kind of discusses that the focus of Undead is around Reborn and Death Rattle, and we definitely see that with some of these new minions. Some dual type minions were also in the blog post, so let's just talk about those 4 minions first before we move on to the reveals. Also, another quick note, everything discussed in this video will be from the blog post, as well as RDU's reveal and Crypt's reveal, all of which will have links in the description if you'd like to refer back to any of those. So the first dual type minion we see is a tier 2 called Blazing Skyfin. It's a 1/3 Murloc and Dragon minion, and after you play a battle cry, gain +1/+1. We all know that Murloc are pretty battlecry heavy, so having the option to play a battlecry onto this minion and it get those additional +1/+1 stats as well is pretty cool, and leads to kind of some, mid-game scaling the way that an Amalgam was, where it took all these buffs. So that's kind of an interesting, larger potential for early mid-game unit at being on tier 2. And then after those initial battle cries, it does open up some pretty cool combos on tier 4 and upwards, because you do have like Terragosa and promo buffs per dragon. That is a dragon, so it will help buff a Terragosa. In addition, Razorgore, that it counts as a dragon on the board for Razorgore, so that's pretty cool. And then your end game could be either like a Caligos board, it could be a Murloc board, it could be a Menagerie board, but I don't know what Menagerie is going to look like. I really want to know, is Lightfang going to still be here? Theo? Okay, we don't need to talk about that right now. I really hope Theodore doesn't leave the game. Anyways, okay. We have tier 5 Sinrunner Blanchie. This is a 4/4. It's a reborn, and this is reborn with full health and enchantments. This is an undead beast. So the first thing that comes to mind for me, since it's on tier 5, is some beast synergies with like Mama Bear. We have the potential for Pale Scale. We have Goldrin. So this could actually be pretty cool. Even like the Trickster Baron combo. This reminds me of a Terragosa, but better. I know I just talked about Terragosa with the Skyfin, but this is a really, really interesting unit. I really like this. There's also a lot of undead enchantments that we're going to talk about a little bit later with these undead units. So this could be a pretty interesting late game and could be, a mainstay on a board for sure. Now, these 2 units are also in RDU's reveal, as they are the undead minions, but let's just go ahead and talk about them here really quickly. We have the tier 5 Hungering Abomination. This is a 3/4 with a Avenge of 1, which is rare. We don't usually see just one unit having to die to create that Avenge effect, and it gains +1/+1 permanently. This kind of reminds me of like Big Fernal. It's also pretty interesting because overall, I feel like an undead theme seems to be like a board anchor situation. So Hungering Abomination could very much live at the back of a beast board, a demon board, and lead to potential pivot, or even just having this really big anchor piece that's gaining stats permanently. Could be in addition to like a milk board with like a Witchwing Nest Matron, a Doomsayer. even like a Pashmar situation where you're not having units just to die. You're also having this one unit scaling, and it doesn't matter the minion type that's dying. It's just as long as a minion is dying, it is getting those additional units. It is on tier 5. It's a little bit later, but I could see this gaining stats pretty quickly and being pretty helpful. My only thought is like tier 5 might be a little bit too late. You could greed triple it from a standard curve where you're on 8 gold and you're selling a lot of units, or finding that like that Selly triple that we all know, where you have the 2 Sellies and then the water droplet, you double sell the Sellies, so you have that extra gold, but you don't have a lot of things to die at that point. You could easily build, you know, a multiple spawning board, but that would be a pretty interesting situation, because if you're too late in the game, it may be a little bit too late for the Hungering Abomination on your board. The other unit revealed to us in the blog post was the tier 6 Colossus of the Sun. I was going to say the Moon. Colossus of the Moon was one of my least favorite constructed cards ever. I really did not like that card. It was very annoying, stuck on the board. A 10 with Divine Shield. Horrible. Anyways, Colossus of the Sun we have on tier 6. This is a 6/6 Divine Shield Reborn. So you have, what, 6 + 6 + 6 + 6. You have 24 attack with this one unit. It does seem like a pretty good piece for a menagerie board. It is on tier 6, but it doesn't have a whole lot of like undead synergy. We'll talk more about that when we talk about RDU's minions through the whole thing. But I'm kind of iffy on what it can actually do for an undead board. It's more of like a standalone undead piece on a menagerie board, in my opinion. But we'll have to see what comes and what goes to really make that judgment. Also in the blog post, we talked about Professor Putricide. Just very briefly, Crypt does a big deep dive on it, so we will talk about it later in this video as well. But he has a 4-cost hero power with build and undead, and you get 3 creations per game, and the rest we will leave for later on. All right, let's move on to RDU's reveal. RDU revealed 17 total minions, one of them being a token for another minion, all undead. So we're going to get our entire undead minions all up in here right now. None of dual synergies. We did see that Sin Runner Blanchie being an undead beast, so we didn't get any of those undead dual minions, but simply undead. On tier 1, we do have the Risen Rider. It is a 2/1 Taunt Reborn. RDU makes the parallel to the Acolyte of Cthulhu, and absolutely it is that. It is a 2-attack Taunt minion, only 1 health this time. But it is kind of nice because we do see a recurring theme of some minions benefiting from minions dying, and this having a taunt is perfect for that. So this could be pretty useful as a tier 1 just to have that availability, as well as having a cumulative 4 attack, so maybe avoiding some early damage if you were trying to get that spicy pretzel mustard. In addition, we have the Rot Hide Knoll. This is a 1/4 and has +1 attack for each friendly minion that died this combat. For me, this reminds me a lot of Hyena in a beast build. You know, you take the Hyena, the 2 cats die. The Hyena does get that additional health though, so it does kind of tidy up a whole lot more. I did make a note that this is a kind of a recurring thing here for Undead, where it's a lot of attack, not necessarily a lot of health addition. So there is the additional attack for the Rot Hide Knoll to maybe clean up anything that hasn't died yet, but it's not a great unit. If for some reason you do feel compelled to stay on 1, or if you're playing a hero that kind of requires you to, such as Rafam, or any of those 1-cost hero power curves that you're trying to play, this could be a good unit just for some presence and some board attack. Yeah, not the best unit. Not bad. Tier 2, we have the Eternal Knight. This seems to be a pretty important unit this game. Tier 2 Eternal Knight is a 4/1 and has +1/+1 for each friendly Eternal Knight that has died this game, wherever it is. So I feel like this is like, do we all remember Pogo Hopper? I shouldn't even ask that because I'm sure we all do. Some of us have nightmares about it. Some of us have dreams about it. But this really reminds me of Pogo Hopper because, you know, you're getting that additional stat gain. Pogo Hopper was from them being played and it was a battle cry, but this is just from those minions dying and getting those additional stats. Getting that Eternal Knight on turn 3, if you're playing that standard curve, seems amazing. Like, just being able to scale Eternal Knights consistently seems incredibly helpful, and we'll talk more about that with a little bit later of a unit. We have the Nerubian Death Swarmer. This is a 1/3, and it is a battle cry that gives your undead +1 attack for the rest of the game wherever they are. So my first thought, obviously this is great just to, have that undead scaling. It is not a reborn itself, but, just having that battle cry of scaling these undead minions you haven't even played yet. But another thought that came to mind for me was Felbat. So if you're playing the demons, which do typically consume the shop, right? Between like Urzul, Felbat, you do have like the Mind Muck. You have a lot of demons that consume shop. So being able to buff shop in any capacity, which it is wherever they are, including the shop, could be pretty helpful. Scarlet Skull is a 1/2 reborn, and the death rattle of give a friendly undead +1/+2. This is pretty interesting because it is a reborn, it is a death rattle, so it does kind of potentially help keep some of those units alive. I did mention like board anchors before, so you would have things die up front, and then you have your board anchors in the back that continue to grow as things die, like the Big Fernal, the Hyena, and those are very, very helpful. So if you have the Scarlet Skull on your board and it just continues to buff other units, and if you're only even playing 2 undead units, that could be incredibly helpful. And this is one of the units that does give additional health, so I do really like this on tier 2. It might even be a little bit strong for tier 2, but hard to say right now. Fool of the Feast is a 2/4 Avenge. Give a friendly minion of each type +3 attack. So this has some of that Menagerie synergy. I like it. I like some Menagerie synergy. However, the Avenge 1 is another thing we're seeing again, just as we did earlier in this video. However, it might be a little bit low. My first minion thought was the Sin Runner Blanchie, because it does come back with that enchantment, so that could be pretty cool. And RDU in his video mentions maybe potentially like death prevention in a low health situation with Divine Shields. Absolutely that as well. We have the Jelly Belly. This is a 3/5. After a friendly minion is reborn, gain +3/+3. Kind of iffy on this one as well, because it is like Big Fernal, but it's not permanent, because the minion does need to be reborn, so this means during the combat. The mid game could be pretty interesting with the Risen Rider, which is that tier 1 where you have the taunt unit getting that reborn. And it could potentially snowball with the Scarlet Skull with the give the friendly undead +1/+2, as I mentioned, if you're playing it on curve. But the actual not permanence of the stat gain itself might not be great. I do like how there's, you don't often see the in-combat buffs. Beast are a good example of that, where you have these kind of low-scaled units, and then as combat progresses, they do get better. So this may be that situation. In addition, on tier 3, we have the Lich Doctor. This is a 3/2. It is a taunt, and at the start of your turn, give your minions that died last combat +1/+1. So it kind of reminds me of Sylvanas Hero Power, where you give those stats to the minions that died last combat, but you don't have to pay a gold for it, so that's pretty cool. That being said, it does seem very, very slow, especially for tier 3. I mean, it could help a summoning board like a leaper situation, but also I talked a lot about leapers in the last meta where they get too strong with Ritual Dagger. They get too strong with Ritual Dagger, and then they don't die in a timely fashion, and then the end of the board dies before the beginning of the board does. So that would be a situation that I could think of, but not great. Or even just one turn of buffs just to kind of enforce your board a little bit. So on tier 4, we have our Soul Splitter. This is a 4/2 reborn, and it gives a friendly undead reborn at the start of combat. This could potentially also help Jelly Belly if you're playing it on curve, unless it procs on Jelly Belly, then might not actually help Jelly Belly that much. It seems interesting in, RDU kind of mentioned it in this one particular conditional, which we will talk about at the end. We have Possessive Banshee. This is a 2/7 battle cry that gives an undead 2/7. I think that this is great because I mentioned the lack of health buff. So if you're consistently playing like the Nerubian Death Swarmer, you're getting that additional attack. Overall, you're adding attack to your undead, but where's the health? Here's the health, Possessive Banshee. Next is the Handless Forsaken. Now this is a 2/3 Death Rattle that summons a 2/2 hand with Reborn that summons a 2/1 hand. So it's 3 minions for the price of 1. Fantastic for anything with Avenge. But it is on tier 4. It's even like synergy with like Pale Scale, with Bird Buddy, with Witchwing. Witchwing requires 3 minions to die. There, one board space can create that because it's not summoning multiple things. If you do give that Soul Splitter and the Handless, that's 6 minions. It's not bad. It's not a lot of stats is the only thing for being on tier 4. But it can definitely buff the back of your board, whatever the case may be. Could be great with Jelly Belly. On tier 5, we have Anubarak, Nerubian King. This is 5/3 Death Rattle. Your undead have +2 attack for the rest of the game wherever they are. So this is very much like the Death Swarmer, but this is +2 attack instead of +1. And instead of being a battle cry, it's a Death Rattle. So you could keep it on your board for 3 turns or so, get that additional attack. You could potentially combo it with the Soul Splitter to get +4 attack in one combat. And it is wherever they are. So if you're running an undead board and you lead with Anubarak and Anubarak dies, that is the rest of your board is affected as well. Next, we have the Hungry Abomination. That's the 3/4 we mentioned earlier that gain +1/+1, Avenge 1 permanently. It is that board anchor I talked about, that back of the board. It could be a Menagerie helper if you just want to have this one big unit and potentially run some rats, or a Void Lord. Could be a nice little scaling piece. On tier 6, we have this Colossus of the Sun, which we talked about earlier, that 6/6 Divine Shield taunt. I mentioned it being more of a Menagerie unit, no real undead synergy, but it could be cool if you have Anubarak doing all kinds of crazy things. We also have that Possessive Banshee where you can give it even more health and just make it this really, really daunting Divine Shield that your opponents have to deal with, and consistently buff it through different avenues before it even touches the board, which is really, really cool. Next, we have that Eternal Summoner. This is an 8/1 that summons 2 Eternal Knights. This is fantastic. Like, if you're playing that kind of pogo situation, it's not a pogo situation, but in my head, it's a pogo situation where you're summoning these knights and then you use the Soul Splitter and Eternal Summoner, you can just knight your opponent to death. They will be knighted and they will die. And I think that's going to be really, really fun. Definitely something I'm going to try on day 1. And of course, on tier 6, we cannot forget, Artie was very excited about Sister Death Whisper. This is a tier 6 4/11. After a friendly minion is reborn, give your undead +1/+3 permanently. So that is an additional health. That is huge. That can be very, very beneficial to just this overall board scaling. And then the reborn with the Soul Splitter seems very, very interesting. So definitely just overall scaling from Sister Death Whisper. I don't know how incremental this scaling is going to be, but I'm excited to see. So my overall thoughts on Undead seem to be another summoning minion type, which is pretty cool right now. We have Demon, which can go either way between summoning type or just really, really large demons, which, as I mentioned with a previous situation, like Fellbat can absolutely benefit if you go undead for a while and play that line of, buffing undead things, buffing the shop, buffing undead wherever they are between the 2 Nerubian minions, then playing into a demon situation where they eat the shop and those minions are buffed. I think that's perfect. But lots of board summoning. I just squirreled so hard. We were talking about different minions that summon. So we have Beast, we have Demon in some situation, we have Mech in some situation, and now we have Undead. We also have these much stronger and more prevalent board anchor situations with minions that benefit in combat of getting bigger as other minions die. And then it does seem overall faster to buff attack than health. We do have those few units, the Banshee that gives +7 health, and then we also have Sister Death Whisper just to have that additional +3 health, but overall seems to be a lot of attack. And I'm excited for what this has to come. I am 1000% playing Knight build. 1000%. I think it's going to be out of control. So good. I might be wrong. I might be overexcited about this, but I don't think that I am. And I hope all of you like play this build and love it too. It's just so easy with Soul Splitter, Eternal Knight, Eternal Summoner. Just, it doesn't even, you can combo that. That can be part of your board. I'm going to stop talking about it now, but let's all try that together. Let's do that on day one. Okay, let's move on to Crypt's reveal. Let's talk really quickly about Crypt's reveal. Crypt went into Professor Putricide in detail. Professor Putricide has a 4-cost hero power in which you build an undead. This is similar to Build a Beast from Constructed, if you remember that. But you have these 2 pools of undead minions. These are 2 separate pools, so you'll never have the same minion twice. Put them together, their stats are combined, and their abilities are combined into one unique unit. That being said, you can't triple them because they are unique units. Chances of you making the exact same thing twice are so incredibly low. And they are tier locked, so your first pool, I believe, if I understood correctly, one of the 3 options will have your tavern tier on it. So you won't low roll that. And then the other 2 will be within 2 tavern tiers. So you won't be able to be on 6 and get 1 drops, which does feel fantastic. Pool 1 seems to be in combat effects, where Pool 2 is keywords, in shop effects, so battle cries, taunts, things like that. And the minion itself does use the art from the tier 1 minion. So that brings to mind Scabs and Tess and Murazond, and any situation where someone can steal your minion. Like, do they steal just that first minion? Is it possible to steal those minions? I am so curious about that. But let's talk about all of these different pools. So Crypt very quickly went through the minions in Pool 1 and Pool 2. I have a pretty cool video coming out about these, so we're not going to go too into detail. But as I mentioned, for Pool 1, a lot of in-combat effects. So some things that kind of stood out, like the Foul Egg is a 0/2 undead that with a death rattle of summoning a 3/3 undead chicken. So if you are, for some reason, not for some reason, if you are choosing to play undead and just going for it, saying, you know, this is a new minion type, let's learn it. I feel like Foul Egg is fantastic because it does have that death rattle effect, which can help with a lot of things. Also, a 3/3 is pretty solid if you do decide to go early and just create undead very, very early with Putricide. This is a pretty fantastic option in my opinion. This is great for early. We'll see how it goes for a little bit later. But there's one thing that I was scared about, which is Amalgam is going to be discoverable in Pool 1. This is a way to have all minion types. That leads to a lot of possibilities for Putricide. And since it is Pool 1, there's a chance that people can discover this between Scabs, Tess, Murazond, just ways of getting your opponent's minions. So that's a little scary. That's a thing that's happening. But all is great. I mean, we all know how absolutely impactful that can be. And the last one that I want to bring to your attention is the Bone Drake. This is tier 6. It's a 5/6 death rattle that adds a random dragon to your hand. Crypt mentioned potentially only being able to show up when dragons are in the game. So we'll see if that's the case. It does make a lot of sense. But just the extra economy there sounds fantastic. And there's a pretty good potential for high roll as well. It does kind of leave the door open if you are playing Putricide and not necessarily trying to go undead, which I do actually really like about Putricide. It's not being able to build these undead units doesn't necessarily bind you to playing an undead board. And I didn't see anything today where I would be like, you have to play a full board of undead. In fact, I did feel like there was a lot of undead units that would just benefit from minions dying, period, whether they were undead or not. So I think that undead can definitely be a very, very helpful support minion type to a lot of comps. So Bone Drake with the undead dragon there was very interesting. Now moving on to Pool 2. Pool 2 does have like those those like keywords. So we have taunt. There were several with stealth. That's going to be pretty interesting. I know with quests, we all saw Theotar's Parasol be helpful in some ways, and having that stealth unit is pretty interesting. So we had like the Shadow Rager. This is a 5/1 undead stealth on tier 4. That is a unit. So it does have attack and it has stealth. So no matter whatever you pick from pool 1, you can just give that whatever it may be stealth as well, which is very, very interesting. And then tier 6, we have the Venomancer. This is a 2/5 undead with poison. One thing I'm incredibly happy about is that these keywords are all pool 2, so you can't make a stealth poison. That would be something. Really happy that cannot happen. We have this poison situation that is able to happen. And this is an undead. So we have another minion type now that is poisonable, because previously it was all minion types, and it was only all minion types because of Murloc and then Murloc. So now we have an undead poison situation introduced to the game as well, but only with Putricide. So playing Putricide, you do have that potential to discover that should you still have the ability left when you're on tier 6 and in that endgame situation. So that's just kind of the basics of what we've seen today. Basics of that blog post, Ardew's video, and Crip's video, all fantastic and filled with information. So definitely refer to those in the description. I would love to hear what you're excited about, your thoughts on these minions. Tomorrow we're going to do another recap reveal, as well as an announcement of what's to come on this YouTube channel for the rest of the week. So I'm very excited for that. Very excited to see what's coming, what's going. We're getting those dual minion announcements tomorrow, which I am definitely potentially more excited for than the undead units. So we'll see what happens there, and we'll have that video out for you on the recap reveal of tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, and tell me what you're excited for. Thanks, everyone. Bye.